Fantastic to see this coming through from Select Committee, and I commend this to the House.
Chair.
I call Dr. Parmjeet Parmar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As our ACC spokesperson, the Honourable Tim McKendall, said, it's a great afternoon. Yes, it is a great afternoon, a very peaceful and harmonious afternoon as we are supporting this bill. But I want to also acknowledge the Associate Minister who acknowledged Honourable Michael Woodhouse, as this bill was already in the pipeline. So this was being worked on. So it was really good to see that the government has taken this up, and very quickly in the year we saw that this bill was referred to the Education and Workforce Select Committee in May, and we finished, we closed submissions on 29th of June. And it was good to see that we received 25 submissions from various organizations and individuals. And out of 25, 13 of them came to the Select Committee for an oral submission. And I want to acknowledge them and thank them, because it's a great effort made by all of them to pick it up when it came for submissions before the Select Committee, and then make their submission and also appear before the Select Committee. So I'm really grateful as the chair of the Education and Workforce Select Committee to all those submitters. Madam Chair, during the Select Committee process, as other members have said, that it was actually really good to work with all members and submitters, because this is a very straightforward bill which we are supporting, as it was already in the pipeline when National was in government. One change that we made, that was about the commencement date in the Select Committee process, that was changing it to 1st of July 2019. And this was mainly to align the changes that we are making through this bill with the funding allocation that is there in Budget 2018. But other than that, it was quite straightforward. And I want to acknowledge all the submitters, and also want to say that some of the things that came during the Select Committee process, they were not in the scope of this bill. But that is all we have already recommended the Select Committee to officials, that that all should be taken into consideration when there are any substantial changes made to the ACC scheme. And my understanding is that that is what the government intends to do. As the Minister said in the first reading speech, that the Minister wants to bring some substantial changes to the ACC scheme. So I'm really hopeful that the views and experiences that we heard during the Select Committee process of this bill will be taken into account when the Minister or the government goes ahead with making those changes. And of course, they will have the opportunity to come back and talk to the Select Committee again. And talking about submissions, it was really good to hear various experiences from people, and its contribution like these that we had during the Select Committee process help us make some meaningful changes. And I want to acknowledge, it won't be possible to acknowledge and read through all submissions, but I just want to acknowledge one, which is from Ernest Heads, and it was also covered in the Otago Daily Times. So Mr. Heads struggled for several years for getting a fair deal. In 2008, Mr. Heads' wife died after being struck by a car, and then he had to go to ACC. He was turned down because the ACC wrote to Mr. Heads telling him that he was only entitled to receive both his wife's ACC compensation and his national superannuation for 1 year, and he must then choose to receive either the ACC payment for the next 4 years or keep his super and relinquish the compensation. So yes, people have had several experiences with ACC. Some were within the scope of the bill, but many experiences that we heard were not in the scope of the bill. But I still want to thank them for their contribution. So in this bill, there are mainly two big, or they are not big changes, but in this bill, compared to other changes, there are two big changes that this bill intends to make. And we have already heard about those changes from other members, but very quickly, I just want to say that one is about bringing fairness for people that get injured close to retirement age. Because we cannot assume that when people retire at the age of 65, they'll stop working. Our superannuation is not means tested. So it is possible that that individual will continue to work, and in choosing between their weekly compensation and superannuation, they are losing that additional income that they would get. It's a different standard for someone who gets injured close to the age of 65, close to retirement, and someone who gets injured before their 64th birthday. So it's really important to bring that consistency in our ACC scheme, and that is what this bill intends to do. Madam Chair, the second change in this is about making the appeals process consistent, because at the moment we have two different authorities looking at the appeals process. And so to give that opportunity to people where they get a fair go, and also they are heard under the same scheme and jurisdiction or legislation, it's important that we have one kind of system looking at all the appeals. Currently, we have the Accident Compensation Appeals District Court Registry and also the Accident Compensation Appeal Authority. So through this bill, we are going to establish Accident Compensation Appeal Authority, and the appeals from here will be transferred to the court, a district court system. And that way what will happen is that everybody will have a consistent go when they are making an appeal. And of course, we want to look at sustainability of the scheme. The cost of this scheme, it's going to be around 1.16 to 1.55 million per annum. We know that around 150 people a year are required to decide between the two options, and 80% of people choose to go with weekly compensation, because usually weekly compensation, as it is 80% of their income, is more than the superannuation. So based on that, it's a very good move. And Madam Chair, just like other members who spoke before me, I support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
I call Mark Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is a pleasure.